and welcome back, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is also a very dear and wonderful colleague of mine, Lara Pugh. Lara is the project leader Learning City at Wollongong City Libraries. With over 20 years in education behind her, Lara will collaborate with lifelong learning stakeholders across council and the Wollongong local government area to establish Wollongong as a UNESCO-accredited learning city by 2024. Over to you, Lara.
Thanks, Amanda. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here today. I'd like to take a moment to pay my respect and acknowledge the traditional custodians of Dharawal country, the land on which I'm joining you today. I'd also like to pay my respect to elders past, present, and those emerging. I'd also like to extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Thank you for having me. I'm here today to tell you a little bit about the project that I'm working on here at Wollongong City Libraries. The goal is to establish Wollongong as a UNESCO learning city by 2024. So around the theme of connection, I've come here today to talk to you to explore the relationship between lifelong learning, learning cities and libraries, as well as the role that connection plays. So let's begin by exploring the concept of lifelong learning. Lifelong learning is probably something that you guys are engaged with every single day. You might have clients calling you on the phone asking how to use a piece of technology. Perhaps you work in programming and you teach some early literacy programs at your library. We also have a range of programs, I guess, for older people and cultural programs where we might like to expand our understanding of the people that live in our community. Lifelong learning can be defined as all purposeful learning activity undertaken throughout life with the aim of improving knowledge, skills, and competencies with a personal, civic, social, and/or employment-related perspective. So we can think about lifelong learning in terms of the cradle to the grave and what we do in our everyday lives. I'd like to share a concept of learning with you that puts it into 4 pillars. And this comes from, or it's adapted by Wheeler and Wong from Farris. So it's this concept of learning to know, learning to do, learning to live together, and learning to be. So let's start by learning to know. So learning how to learn is one form of learning, and you can become an active learner. Throughout your life, we're constantly learning. Learning to do is where we're acquiring knowledge and turning it into innovation. And I think when we think about our employment and what we've been doing over the past 2 years, adapting to a new way of working, a new way of communicating, we've all learned so much. Learning to live together. So this is where we might want to learn about the diverse people who live in our community, or this might be one of the reasons why we love to go traveling overseas and eating delicious food. And learning to be is all about individual empowerment and fulfilling yourself and living a fulfilled life. So I like this concept of learning where it's not just about what you learn in a classroom, it's about learning every single day. And I know as library technicians, you yourself are constantly learning, but you're also dealing with clients who are constantly learning and adapting as well. But let's think of this in a global context. I'm sure we're all aware of the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And as you can see, quality education is number 4. Learning does play a key role in sustainable development, and the UN will tell you that actually education is required to achieve all 17 of these global goals. What does this have to do with Australia? Well, I really admire the work that ALIA is doing and the commitment that ALIA is making to these global goals. And I wonder if you guys are using them in any of your library strategies or in any of the work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. It's really intriguing to me. So while there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, ALIA have chosen 10 stretch targets based on the work of libraries. And so they're going to spend and support us for the next 9 years to think about how can we support the achievement of these global goals at a local level. So I'm going to talk you very quickly through those 10 goals. The first one is literacy. So you think of the work that you're doing as a library technician to support early years, digital literacies, as well as media literacies. Access to knowledge as well as in two forms. So this open access practices and principles where libraries are always seen as the last bastion or the last place where any person can have equal access to information. And then as well as that, ALIA are doing work behind the scenes around copyright reform. Here they're looking at equitable access. So equal access for everyone across Australia to online and physical library services. Culture and heritage, so working in partnership with Aboriginal communities to develop culturally informed and respectful library services and continuing to improve those over time. Sustainable communities, so looking at environmental sustainability and taking an open position on climate change. The other thing I really love about what they're doing is saying that libraries can be a centre of health and well-being for our communities. And I can see that even here at Wollongong with a lot of the programs and resources that are available to our communities. Number 8 looks at diversity and gender equality, not just in the workforce, which I know is the theme for the ALIA 2022 National Conference, but also in our collections and services. Number 9, lifelong learning. So supporting lifelong learning for our workforce as well as our community. And finally, global citizenship, that we, even working, you know, in humble old Wollongong, I'm somehow connected to you guys nationally and to our colleagues globally. So as you can see, ALIA has made a commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals, and we can see here that lifelong learning plays a key role in many of these 10 targets under literacy, equitable access, culture and heritage, sustainable communities, health and wellbeing, diversity and gender equality, as well as global citizenship. So, lifelong learning actually plays a massive role in the work that we do every day in libraries. So what does this have to do with learning cities? Let me tell you a little bit about what a learning city is. So this diagram here comes from the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. They provide people like me and you with a kind of framework and stepping stones for how you can build a learning city from nothing. So you can see they provide us with fundamental conditions, major building blocks, and here they are. I'm not sure if you can see those very clearly, but it's looking about equity in education, revitalising learning in families and communities, using digital learning effectively and technology. And one of the big things, the last one, is a vibrant culture of learning throughout life. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but this essentially means that we promote learning by celebrating it. So it's this concept of a learning festival. And I'm wondering if any of you are aware of any learning festivals that are happening in libraries near you. So there's all of these amazing resources about what a learning city is on the UNESCO website. I would like to tell you a little bit about this network called the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities. So there are currently 229 cities from around 55 countries around the world who have gone through this process of becoming a learning city and are now members of this global family. And they come together to share ideas, resources on how they use learning to solve complex problems. So a UNESCO Learning City, going back to those Sustainable Development Goals, directly addresses two of them, quality education as well as sustainable cities and communities. And that goal 11 is actually very much like the work of a local council where you're building a sustainable, safe, resilient, harmonious community. So, what does it mean to apply and become a member of the global network of learning cities? There's a process that we have to go through, and we have to be able to demonstrate that we have set a few things in place. So we have to be able to tell them in our application form what our vision is and our motivation. We have to have a plan in place. We also have to develop some governance for a learning city. So what kind of structure have you put in place, and have you got all these key stakeholders involved? One thing I love about the learning city concept is that it's about mobilizing existing resources, so pooling resources together. So what could the local university and a local multicultural society do by pulling their resources together to help improve the lives of those community members? How is your city ensuring that learning is accessible to all citizens? So access and inclusion are an underlying feature of a learning city. And this is something that I think we can all agree with is really important for people of all ages, all backgrounds, and all ways of life. They want to know that you've got mechanisms in place to monitor and evaluate lifelong learning and initiatives. And as I mentioned before, what celebratory events has your city organised to promote learning? So there's this concept of a learning festival or a learning celebration. So just to give you a couple of examples, what does a learning city look like around the world? So in Korea, they've, and the city of Songdaemungu, they have made use of their high-rise apartments and created learning communities in the central areas. In Greece, they have seen that the recently arrived refugees from the conflict in Syria may have caused some difficulties in the community. So they put together a Fit for All program that brought together the local community as well as the refugees to gather around sport and share tradition and culture. Finally, in Malaysia, they've improved access to public learning by having a free bus. So as you can see, every city has different problems or different needs, and the UNESCO framework allows us to work within it so that we can look at what problems we might like to solve by learning. So let's look at Australia, and I'm very keen to find out if we have anyone from Greater Melbourne with us today or in Tasmania. So Circular Head in Tasmania, Melton and Wyndham, they're in Greater Melbourne. They are 3 UNESCO-accredited learning cities. There are other learning communities in Australia, but they either are a bit like Wollongong, maybe they're on that journey, or maybe they use the learning community framework, but they're not seeking accreditation. So I want to give you a little example here of Wyndham City in Greater Melbourne. So as you can see, they have a learning community strategy, which they put together through a community learning board, which will have representation from across Wyndham City. As you can also see, they have 2 types of learning festivals. This year they had their own local festival, which was around the theme of COVID, re-emerging, connecting and thriving in Wyndham. And you can see there the Global Learning Festival. They're one of the leading partners, along with Wyndham, for the 2021 Global Learning Festival. I encourage you to take a look at that online when we're finished today. ALCN, so Australia has its own Australian Learning Communities Network, which has provided a great support for learning communities around the country. I highly recommend you look them up as well. So here we are in Wollongong, Dharawal country. What are we doing here for our Learning City project? When I started, I realised that Wollongong City Council has so many strategic documents with goals that require lifelong learning to achieve them. So if you look at this community vision, you probably can't see it, but it says that we are leaders in building an educated, creative and connected community. Across Wollongong City Council, there are environmental sustainability workshops. We've got beach and water safety happening at our surf clubs. We have creative arts programs at our art gallery. We have so many things, but at the moment, everyone's kind of doing their own thing around lifelong learning and how they're managing it. So let's think about Wollongong City Libraries. As you can see, there are 5 goals in our strategic plan, and goal 5 is that our library is a gateway for lifelong learning. So what we're trying to achieve here at Wollongong is taking this commitment to lifelong learning to the next level. And we have a 3-year plan to get us to UNESCO accreditation. This year we're focusing, as I said, sort of on internal engagement, where we're looking at what's happening across council, and we're coming together to take a more coordinated approach and establish a community of practice. And that's been received really well by community educators across the organisation. Next, in 2022, I'll be going out to the community and doing a lot of community engagement and trying to understand what are the needs of our community, where are the gaps, and how might we fill them. Finally, by 2024, just like Wyndham, we hope to establish a cross-sector steering committee with key stakeholders from the local university, TAFE, community college, schools, multicultural societies, everyone to come together to think about the ways in which we can use learning to solve problems. So as you can see here, yeah, this is the image around connection that I think relates to the theme of what we're doing here today at LibTech 21, thinking about how we bring together all of these parts to create a whole. So that's a little bit down the track for us. My current focus is looking at internally at the moment for the next year at Wollongong City Council, and the first phase of our project, like I mentioned, we're coming together to establish internal governance. So we have a project working group with 23 members from across council, from the Botanic Garden, Art Gallery, all over. We're trying to agree upon a definition of lifelong learning. We're mapping all of the learning that we offer our community, and we're going to see what we can do with that data. We also want to look at developing a shared evaluation framework. We all deliver our own programs, but we don't have a way as Wollongong City Council to say we have X impact on the community. We're also having a go at participating in a learning festival and events. We collaborated with the local university 2 weeks ago on Global Climate Change Week, and we made some contributions of events there. And we're also participating in the Global Learning Festival. We will culminate, this will culminate in the development of a Learning City action plan next year. So, as I said, check out the Global Learning Festival website if you're interested. There are lots of events that members of your community can sign up for free over a 4-day period. So, I feel like I've talked so much and I'm concerned that I'm over time. There are 2 conclusions that I'd like to draw around the theme of connection with the Learning City project here at Wollongong City Council. Firstly, I think there is a really clear connection between lifelong learning, learning cities, and the work that we do every day in libraries across Australia. Finally, I think it's really important that we can connect with our partners, just like an upcoming speaker, I believe it's Helen Balfour and Sharon Beccaria, around pandemic partnerships and the importance of building partnerships with other organisations like TAFE. So I'd like to say thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Lara, for your wonderful presentation. Very insightful, and I think it definitely plays into the key theme of connections, so thank you. We do actually have a few questions for you. So thank you for that very insightful presentation. What if a library technician is interested in UNESCO learning cities, but they live in a regional or all remote community?
Oh, I think that you could still reach out to the Australian Learning Communities Network. You could talk to your supervisors about this, because what we're finding with this new digital world that we live in, there's a lot of opportunities that you can seek out online for your community. So, and feel free to send me an email.
Great, thanks, Lara. We also have another one. What would be the best starting point for a library technician who wants to explore how learning cities could be applied to their own library?
Ooh, I think it's a similar thing. It's about making connections with people. So reaching out to libraries like Hoppers Crossing Library in Greater Melbourne. That's where Wyndham. That's Wyndham. Reaching out to me, reaching out to the Australian Learning Communities Network, and having a look online at the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning website.
Thanks, Lara. And another one that's just come through. So you spoke about the future plans for joining UNESCO, but how much time before now has planning been going on?
Oh yeah, great question. So I would say at Wollongong City Libraries, they've been sort of looking into this learning city concept for a couple of years. This has been done through students who've come on a placement at the library, and they've got them to explore the concept of a learning city and see how it might apply and do a bit of testing. And then it wasn't finally until they got a business proposal together with this research to go up to councillors to get the funding to get this project up and running.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Lara. That's it for all our questions. I know there is a lot of talk generated about learning cities, so thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we'll be taking a break. So go and stretch the legs, get a quick bite to eat, and we will see you all back at 3:55. Thank you, everyone.